Good morning. Happy Thursday to everyone. I hope you are safe and well and healthy. I'd like to open with a quote by James Humes. And James says the art of communication is the language of leadership. And that's really what we're talking about today. Not only the art of communication, but the art of very transparent communication. So, the art of communication is the language of leadership. These times are so trying for everyone, aren't they? Like our organizations are in a battle every day. And I'm so happy and proud to see how communities all across the United States are coming together to really support their healthcare organizations, to truly say we're here for you. What can we do, and to know that your organization, your hospital, your clinics are serving them and serving them well. So I'm also sure that it's never been more vital or apparent to you, if you will, that you are serving families, that you're responsible for not just the human beings that come to work in your department every day, your organization every day. You're responsible for lives. And people are bringing their lives to work. They always have, but in times of a pandemic and crisis, what can happen is, the normal way that we deal with stress at home can be kind of hidden from work, and it comes right out, in times like these. So you're kind of, if you allow yourself to think like this, and I can understand why you would not allow yourself to think like this, that you're responsible for lives, for keeping not only your employees healthy, but making sure that they then, keep their families healthy. So Sue did a great job last week on her live, really explaining what fear and overwhelming fear and anxiety can do to an organization. It can cause chaos, and it can cause silos. Well, let's talk this morning about the opposite of that, which is how your communication style, your transparency can really resolve that chaos and calm, build bridges instead of silos. So here we go, right? The art of communication is the language of leadership. So how do you personally decide what to communicate and when? How to communicate each thing. We're going to give you 5 tips today on how to, best approach or best develop your transparency and your transparent communication skills. But remember that any change at all requires communication. And it requires not just flippant, oh, here we go, I told one person, and they're all a bunch of gossips, so I'm sure they'll tell everybody else, right? So leaders who assume that their team knows something, or assume that because they said it once at a staff meeting, or they assume that because they walked out and told the day shift, and the day shift will just pass it on to everyone else because it was way too juicy to not communicate, are doing, their art of communication and their language of leadership all wrong. Okay. So we have to practice the art of transparent communication and make it a language of our personal leadership, or else social media will do it for us, right? The grapevine will do it for us. And that's where anxiety, fear, silos, and chaos come in. So if you want your art of communication to be your language of leadership, listen for these 5 solves, right? Now, 5 is way more than I like to do, as you know. My top is 3, but I felt like these 5 were really, really important today, and I only want you to choose one. As I'm going through them, I want you to think to yourself, do I already do that? Do I do that well? Do I need to up my communication game, so to speak? But choose one thing, of course, that you will commit to 30 days or even 21 days, or commit to trying, so that you can make your art of communication your language of your leadership. So, what your employees need to know is that leadership has capacity, leadership meaning you, has capacity to effectively lead through change. Does your leadership, your personal leadership, communicate that you can effectively lead a change? So, what your employees want to see is, do you got a plan, right? Do you effectively communicate the plan? Do you ask them what their input is? Do you say the words, hey, you guys are on the front line, I'm not. I believe I know what barriers and challenges you face every day, or what problems this change could bring about for us. But what am I missing? What am I missing? I need you guys to tell me. That is so powerful. Makes you vulnerable. It makes you humble. It shows that you lead with great humility. It shows that you are exhibiting, servant leadership. So have a plan, communicate the plan, but ask for input into the plan first. Number one, right? Does your leadership, do you lead as though you can effectively lead change? Okay. Or because if nobody has faith in your ability to lead change, they're not going to follow you anywhere. Okay. That's number one. Number two, communicate, over communicate. Right? You can't communicate enough. The leader who thinks that they're just over communicating, or others are over communicating around them, are people who probably think that there's too much gratitude in the world too. Right? It's like, I don't need to write thank you notes. My people know that I appreciate with them because I said hello to them yesterday. No. So find different ways, though, to communicate. What I see leaders do is get stuck in one method of communication, that because they said it at a staff meeting, or they threw something up on the John Doerr News, or they sent out an email, most likely, that God has spoken and it shall be so, right? And that's not enough. So how do your people receive communication? What's the best way to get them to notice it? And you got to play with it. But remember, you likely, because we all do in healthcare today, have different generations working in your department. And so people receive communication differently, and as humans, and as a generation. And so you have to almost feel as though you're over communicating so that it resonates with the individuals that you have working for you. So that's number two, communicate, over communicate. Number three is be very simple and dependable in your approach. So, when you encourage your employees to go to a CEO forum to hear from the CEO herself or himself as to what's going on, when you round with people, right? When you ask them, how are things going for you? How are you doing right now? How did you handle this recent change that we put in place, right? When you ask that one question, that's simple. It's almost over simple, and it's dependable. They can depend on you to ask them, because that is the language of your leadership, right? The art of communication is the language of your leadership. And so it's why you need to update your communication board. It's a board, for crying in the night. You can't get more simple and dependable. But if you don't do it, if you don't have this cadence of the different ways that you communicate and be very transparent in your communication, then guess what? Like, they can't rely on you. And so then things get made up. Social media becomes right then, right? Then what they're hearing through the grapevine, or what they're picking up on social media, actually becomes the truth if you aren't very simple, very straightforward, and very dependable in your communication. It's why, when leaders say to me, I have staff meetings, but only two people ever come, and it's the same two people. So, and first of all, I always say, do you have food? Right? Do you have chocolate? So you have staff meeting, you got to get people there, right? And in order to get people there, they need to know that that you're going to be very transparent, that they're going to learn great things, that you're going to ask their opinion, you're going to ask for their assistance in your leadership. So being simple and dependable in your approach is, am I dependable? I guess if you're evaluating these five, key tactics to really elevate your transparent communication, that, a good question to self-evaluate is, am I reliable? Am I dependable? And you know what? You could ask it in your next rounding. Okay. Number 4, counter or overcome the fear of the unknown. And, again, this is something that Sue really talked about a lot last week in her live. But, this is really important. I call it the elephant in the room. Or I also like to call it doing a pre-mortem. So when you ask a group of individuals, when you ask your staff, when you sit down and just have lunch with them and say, guys, what are you worried about? What concerns you? What's the worst thing that could happen to it? This change that we're putting in place with the day that we're going to face? Tell me the worst. Because when you say the worst, right, like when it's out loud, first of all, people know that their own inner anxieties are the same as, Susie and Kathy and, Billy. Okay. Then it's like, oh, geez, I'm not a moron. I'm not being over anxious. I'm not letting this blow up in my head, right? Counter or overcome it. And how you do that is you just pull it out, you say it, you make it known, and then you brainstorm together. What if? What if that does happen? What will we do? Okay. When leaders don't do that, you're assuming that, you're making the assumption that your people know that if the worst happens, you'll take care of that for them. Again, that's not being humble. That's not serving with humility. That's not being vulnerable. You need to let them know that you're concerned about that worst as well, right? That's your fear too, that, this is going to blow up or go horribly wrong, or you'll be left without an EMR for the day, or, whatever. So pre-mortem. Bring the elephant out in the room. Overcome fear and anxiety by talking about it. Number 5, right? And always end with positivity. Create excitement and hope for a better future. When you put a change in place, when you announce something new, or when you're communicating very transparent and bad news, you can create excitement and hope for the future yourself. Obviously, you have to give some thought for that. Obviously, before you do transparent communication, such as posting something in the bathroom, posting something on your communication board, speaking about it at a staff meeting with your staff present, communicating during rounding, one-on-one communication of change, communication of transparent results, then, you have to know, what is my hope? What is my excitement for the future? Because remember, 2 strikes against everybody who works for you. First, they're human. Second, they work in healthcare. And our brains automatically go to the negative. And in order to overcome that, but in order to create hope for the future, you can't allow that to dwell. Right? So what if someone surprises you with, well, this is all just gonna blah, 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 and no one's gonna support us, and when the negativity starts spewing all over you, have hope, right? Communicate that hope. And nobody's asking you to be patty positive cheerleader all the time. But if your art of communication and your leadership language doesn't have hope and excitement for the future in it now, that's probably your number 1 thing to work on. So it's, there's the 5. Remember, choose one. Don't overwhelm yourself. It is so difficult to rely on effective and transparent communication right now. I don't know about you guys, but my inbox is full of the same information over and over and over. So, I really recommend that you choose two effective sources of communication that are going to help you navigate these changing times, navigate this pandemic, and follow them and get rid of everything else. But you also need hope. You need excitement for the future. You need positivity. You need perseverance. And we're your girls, right? Capstone Leadership Solutions. So have an amazing Thursday. End your week well, and be safe.